Hi everyone, it's RJ from Emerald City Hockey, and this is part 2 of a series looking at potential free agents that the Kraken could sign this offseason. Part 1 was a written article on our website, emeraldcityhockey.com, where I explored whether or not the Kraken should sign one of Johnny Gaudreau or Philip Forsberg. Link to that article is in the description below if you want to give it a read. Now, before we get started, I just want to quickly ask that you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss all the exciting draft and free agency coverage we have planned for this offseason. Today, I'm going to be looking at a pair of wingers who just helped the Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup, Valeri Nichushkin and Burakovsky. If you watched Colorado's Stanley Cup run, you surely noticed these two players, generating offense, consistently winning matchups, and scoring some big-time goals. Both of them are set to hit the free agent market on July 13th as unrestricted free agents, or UFAs. Now that means they'll be free to sign with any team. Of course, that includes the Seattle Kraken, who have already stated via GM Ron Francis that they plan to be aggressive in free agency this summer. For a team that scored the fourth fewest goals in the NHL last season, an offensively gifted winger to play in the top 6 has to be a top priority for the Kraken if they hope to turn things around quickly. And after watching these two players help power their team to a Stanley Cup victory, it's easy to picture them helping out a Kraken forward group in desperate need of reinforcements. So, should the Kraken try to lure one of these guys away from the Cup champs? Let's find out. In my article on Gaudreau and Forsberg, I started off with kind of a public service announcement about the dangers of unrestricted free agency, and I think it's important enough that I should mention the main point again here. In short, free agent signings rarely work out well for teams. The Athletic's Dom Lucian wrote a great article on this in 2020, link in the description below, that showed the teams only get about a quarter of the actual value for every dollar they spend in free agency. There's a lot more detail to that research, of course, and if you want to dive further into that, you can look at part 1 of this series or read Lucian's article if you subscribe to The Athletic. But when you look at the results, it becomes clear that spending big in free agency is often a losing proposition. And one area in particular that I've warned about before is the dreaded middle class of free agent forwards. Those are second and third line forwards who are given top 6 money and 4+ years of term. Recent examples include Milan Lucic, Kyle Okposo, Andrew Ladd, David Clarkson, James Neal, Franz Nielsen, David Backes, Ville Leno, Dave Bolland, and Troy Brouwer. Not every mid-tier forward signing ends up as regrettable as the names I just listed, but in many cases, these contracts quickly become anchors that teams have to pay hefty sums to get off the books. And since today we'll be looking at a couple players who fall into this category, I wanted to take a closer look at this group of free agents. After all, I think the best way to get a sense of what to expect from a free agent signing is to look at how similar signings have performed in the past. So let's take a look at this middle class of free agent forwards, and we'll define that as UFA forwards signing with a new team to contracts of 4 or more years at a cap hit between $4.5 and $7 million. So over the last decade, that gives us 31 different players who make up that category. That includes the 10 I mentioned earlier, plus 21 other players. And since the primary purpose of bringing in one of Nichushkin or Burakovsky would be to help add scoring for the Kraken, I wanted to see how that group of forwards has done when it comes to scoring. When we look at Nichushkin and Burakovsky's production, it's easy to see how they could help. Both players scored a 20+ goal, 60+ point pace last season. But looking at how these types of signings have gone in the past shows us that when it comes to that point production, one thing we should not expect is improvement. Only 26% of these middle class of forwards ever improved upon their point total from their last full season before signing. And that's not just during the duration of the contract, but over the rest of their career. Meanwhile, only 16% would go on to set a new career high in points after signing their contract. So it's unlikely that any player in this range has his best years ahead of him. In fact, it's actually more than twice as likely that the player will be out of the league entirely. If you look at the 19 contracts that were set to expire before this offseason, 57% of those players were no longer playing in the NHL by the time their deal would have been up, and 42% ended in the contract being bought out. So when I talk about the dreaded middle class, this is what I mean. Every year, teams get excited about this group of forwards, and every year we see more of these deals age poorly. Whether it's due to aging, adjusting to a new team, or injury, as Kraken fans have seen with Jaden Schwartz. So back to the actual players at hand, Valeri Nichushkin and Andrei Burakovsky. Given what we know about free agents and this middle tier of forwards in particular, I think our baseline assumption here should be to proceed with caution. When dealing with players at UFA age, the odds will always be stacked against you. But do either of these players have what it takes to defy the odds and be worth signing for the Kraken? Let's start by doing a quick side-by-side comparison of the two players, because they play a very different style of game from one another. Nichushkin, who became an analytics darling a few years ago with his stellar defensive play, is as responsible of a two-way forward as they come. He's reached a new level offensively this season as he finally figured out how to finish, and his relentless forechecking opened up a ton of space for the numerous skilled players who have shared the ice with him. Burakovsky, on the other hand, is a more one-dimensional player. As someone who provides most of his value in the offensive zone, Burakovsky is very good at what he does. He scored at least a 60-point pace of each of his 3 seasons with Colorado, and his career 14.6 shooting percentage shows that he has a sustainable talent for finishing. The fact that he's been able to score so much while only getting third-line ice time is also a good sign. But his play on the defensive side of the puck is lacking, so much so that he was a healthy scratch at times during the Avs Cup run. Looking at each player's contract projections, Evolving Wild projects Nichushkin to sign a 7-year deal at a $6.36 million cap hit, while Burakovsky's projection is 7 years at a cap hit of $6.9 million. And after digging into the underlying numbers, watching game tape, and considering the Kraken's needs, I think Nichushkin would be the much more preferable option between the two if Seattle were to sign one. It comes down to the type of game that each player plays, combined with the term and money commitment you're going to need to make if you sign one of these two players. While Burakovsky may be a slightly better fit stylistically for what the Kraken are missing, as a one-dimensional scorer, his staying power on a 7-year term is highly suspect. Given what we know about the middle class of free agent forwards, I would make a very confident bet that Burakovsky's 61 points this season will continue to stand as his career high. And if he's being paid almost $7 million and not scoring at that level for you, you're in real trouble. I could see whatever team signs Burakovsky regretting it pretty quickly if the fit isn't perfect. This is why I prefer Nichushkin, who with his defensive play and forechecking can still do other things even if he's unlikely to ever exceed that point total again. Nichushkin has a proven track record of being one of the best two-way forwards in the NHL, and the more I watch his game, the more I think it'll age better than most and adapt well to different systems. What worries me with Nichushkin is what his next contract will look like. Evolving Hockey's contract projections came out over a month ago, and with Nichushkin now having a Stanley Cup ring on his finger and a playoff performance that had him in the Conn Smythe conversation, I would be surprised to see his eventual cap hit start with anything less than a 7. And that kind of money, at that age, with a 7-year term, always carries some level of danger. Now, whether it's Nichushkin or Burakovsky, I feel like the Kraken should keep in mind that maybe a player who's on the Avalanche in a perfect environment with elite players all around them might not perform as well when removed from that situation. Just something to think about. So, is signing one of these players a good idea for the Kraken? No, I don't think so. You may get a few seasons of okay value, but history shows you will almost never get the production you pay for. Even in the best case scenario, which we've seen is quite unlikely, you're still getting just even value for that contract. And frankly, that's not how the most successful teams are built. The most successful teams have middle six forwards who bring value beyond what their cap hit is. Nichushkin and Burakovsky this season are good examples. They're paid the same as most depth players around the league, but can produce at a much higher rate, freeing up money for skill players and creating mismatches down the lineup. Once they're paid fair market value, you're forced to sacrifice elsewhere in the lineup. Look no further than the other team in the Stanley Cup final, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow were like cheat codes on third-line salaries in their 2020 and 2021 Stanley Cup runs. But when it came time for those two to get paid in free agency, the Lightning wisely decided that instead of sacrificing elsewhere, they should instead try to sign the next Coleman and Goodrow. And through acquisitions of Nick Paul, Brandon Hagel, Corey Perry, and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, they've recreated a cheap, overachieving bottom six. If the Kraken want to contend for a Stanley Cup, they're better off trying to find the next Valeri Nichushkin instead of giving this one a contract he has little chance of overperforming. Making a big splash for one of these Cup champs might seem like a tempting shortcut to competing for a playoff spot, but it's not how you lay the foundation for a truly successful team. And ultimately, that's what I want the Kraken to be. So that's my answer to this question, but I'd love to hear your take on this. Do you want to see Nichushkin or Burakovsky on the Kraken? Are they what Seattle needs to turn things around? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming draft and free agency coverage. Thanks for watching.